G'day guys, welcome back to Off-Road Crusader, and in this episode we're going to do a full service of the 200. Phoenix here has got 125,000 Ks on her. She's been well taken care of in the past, but I don't have a service history. When I bought the car, it didn't come with one. I've tried chasing it up, but it just hasn't happened. So the best thing to do there is obviously do a full service on the vehicle. That way everything's back to a clean slate and you can work from there. So I'll make sure to record everything that I'm doing today. We're going to be changing over the engine oil filter, fuel filter. I would change the air filter as well, but it's actually in really good nick, so I'm going to leave that for today. And we're also going to do the front and rear differentials and the transfer case as well. Now the diff oils are very easy to change over. I'm actually got a awesome little tool from K-On that I'll show you a bit later on. And I'm going to do the transfer case as well because it's also quite easy on the 200 series. For these, you're going to need some different oils. In the engine, I'm using the Newlon Apex, which is a fully synthetic oil. I'm running a 5W30. Toyota specify anything from a 0W30 up to a 15W40, depending on your location, number of kilometers on the car, etc., etc., etc. A specific thing that you do need to look for, especially in this model with the facelift, is to have a DPF compatible engine oil, which this one does meet. So that's what I'm using today. In the diffs, I'm going to run a Penrite Pro Gear fully synthetic. This is a 75W85, which is specified for the 200 series. Toyota recommended it is a GL5 rated oil, which is quite high, but the Penrite does meet that specification, so we're going with that. You'll need about 6.5 litres, 6.2 litres, sorry, to do front and rear diffs. And then we're also going to do the transfer case, which is a 75W90. Slightly different, GL5 as well. That takes about 1.5 litres from memory, so we'll get into that once we get there. So look, we're going to get started. We're going to start off in the engine bay, do the engine oil, which is nice and easy. Fuel filter will change over. I'll clean out the air filter as well, just that way it's all a clean slate, and then we'll start moving under the car and get the diffs and the transfers done. So the first thing we're going to do, obviously pop the bonnet. We're going to take off the engine oil filler cap. What this does allow is it allows for air to replace the oil which is draining out of the engine. Allows the engine oil to get removed quicker, which is obviously better for service times, but also good because that way it sort of sucks up any sort of sludge that's left in the engine. That sort of larger, quicker velocity of oil movement does tend to pull a bit more of that stuff out. So worth just taking that off. And that way also, you know, when you've emptied the oil, and you've put your plug back on, you know that you then can fill it back up, which I have been stuck with before, to make sure that you haven't just drained all the oil out and you can't replace it. So with the car supported on chassis stands, we can crawl underneath the vehicle and locate the sump plug, which is about here. Well, it is here. If you find your drive shaft, your CV drive shaft, it's just rearwards of where that is. There is your sump right there. Now for most times you do this job, you do need to remove the bash plate to get access to it. I've got the ARB, well, the car has got ARB fitted bash plates to the car, which actually have a little valley that is installed so that you don't need to remove the bash plates, that the oil then falls on that valley, trickles out the way, and ideally you put your oil catch here and it's all collected on there. That's the theory. So I'm going to try it out today, and either it's going to make a big mess or it's going to be an absolute breeze to do. You will need a 14mm socket to remove the sump plug. As you're undoing it, put a bit of pressure to push the sump plug back into the sump, so that way as you're undoing it, no oil is coming out. And once you feel you're right at the end of it, pull it away nice and quickly. Your oil will nice and come out. You won't get a hand covered in hot oil. So ideally this shouldn't be too tight, but you never know what the last service person's done. Oh, there we go. Whoa! Well, it worked. Just got more trajectory on it than I expected. After wiping off any excess oil around the sump plug, making sure that your oil has all drained as much as it can. Refit your sump plug with a new washer. The washers themselves are very inexpensive, so you may as well just replace them every time. If you don't replace them, you do run the risk of leaking, and then you have to drain all your oil and start again. So for the cost of whatever it is, about $1 for the sump washer, you may as well do it. So I've got a new genuine Toyota sump washer on there. The correct torque setting for these sump plugs is 14 Newton meters. So the oil filter on this car is located behind this bash plate down here, which we obviously have to remove. So there's 2 bolts at the front, there's 3 at the back there. We're going to take them all off, drop this guard off, and then you'll be able to see the oil filter. So with the bash plate out the way, you can see the oil filter housing, which is that funky doohickey right there. You've got a 3/8 inch square receiver there. Usually you can put a breaker bar or something on that. You can remove that bottom plug. You can sort of see that's just a metal plug that should unscrew, and that allows you to drain the filter housing. What I found in my previous 200 and in this one as well is they just seize together. And what that does mean is that after that, usually you're meant to use a special oil filter removal tool, because you can see there's a bunch of flutes on there, which I think there's some double-digit number of flutes that are on there, and it's specific to the 200. And usually you need a special tool for that. And this is good because you can just use a 3/8 inch socket, a wrench or a breaker bar to remove the whole thing, which is what I do. And that unscrews the whole filter housing. It's a bit of a bugger to try and show you, but I'll do my best to show you me unscrewing it. So this does make a bit of a mess, hence the rag underneath. Let's give her a go. Oh. This will start dripping oil soon. The whole thing does unscrew. Alright, do the rest by hand. There'll probably be a bit of oil come out too. Oh, there it goes. It's alright, it's what the rag's for. Oh, and there it is. That's the oil filter. So now that we made a mess of that, now it's good practice to leave the oil to just allow it to drain for about 10-15 minutes. Just make sure that all the little bits and pieces do make their way out of the engine. So while it's doing that, we're going to move on and do the fuel filter. This is quite a simple procedure once you've sort of done it once. Look, it's definitely worth doing. I think your book will tell you anywhere between 20 and 40,000 Ks to replace it. Due to these being a common rail diesel engine, and they are a very expensive engine, you don't want any bad contaminating fuel going in there. So I prefer to change them out more regularly than not. The filters are very inexpensive to buy, and it's honestly like a 10-minute job to change over your fuel filter. So we're going to do that now. So all you have is there's a few electrical connectors. There's 2 electrical plugs, and there's also your 2 fuel lines as well, fuel going in and fuel going out of the filter. As you take those off, do use something to bung up the fuel lines. You can get clamps that go on those as well, which are, obviously if you're a mechanic, you'll know what those are. I like to use M10 size bolts. They tend to slide into the fuel hose quite nicely, and just block the fuel hose up, and that way nothing can get in or out. Once that's done, pull them out of the way. I'd probably tuck them behind this aircon line here, so they're sitting upwards, and that way no fuel's dripping out of them. Once that's done, we undo the 2 mounting bolts holding it to the vehicle, and then we remove the whole fuel filter assembly away. We can put it on the bench and change it over there. If you're on the side of the road, you can obviously do all this in the car, but for videoing purposes, and also just because I like to pull everything off and give it a clean before I put it all back on, that's what we're going to do today. So let's get stuck in. So now we've got our fuel filter assembly out and on the workbench. Nice clean space. I like to use a bit of cardboard, then I can throw it out afterwards. And we need to remove the filter assembly from inside of here. This is currently still full of diesel. Grab yourself a container, start pumping it out. You've got the fuel primer plunger on the top there. Keep pumping that until nothing else comes out. Makes your job way less messy. That'll do. There'll be a little bit left in the bowl, but that's okay. So once we're at this stage, we just need to take the top housing off, which is held on by these three 10mm bolts. So we're just going to take those off. Cool. So with those out of the way, we can remove the lid of the assembly. Keep that over there. And that's where you can see the filter. So that's your filter in there. It's a little housing bit that can come away. We'll leave that there for now. We remove this bit, and there we can see our fuel filter. This one's not actually too bad. These get blacked up and full of gunk quite quickly. This one's not too bad, but you can see there's a few spots there. I can also see there's some little schmutz and stuff at the bottom of the bowl, which we're definitely going to get rid of, but we're going to replace that fuel filter entirely. So what we'll do is we'll take that out, we're going to tip out everything that's left in here, give it a good clean, and then put our new filter assembly in. I will just show this as well. So at the bottom here is a float. That's for your water in the filter alarm. It's a proper name for it. So that float moves up when there's water in the bottom of the fuel filter assembly, and that senses off, tells off this little wire here that goes to your sensor and puts an alarm on your dash. So this is a whole white bit of plastic down the bottom there. You can see that it's the other side there. There's a little drain tap that you can actually use to drain out some of the diesel as well. But this whole section can actually be removed. So that's actually like a nut. So you can actually reach in there, twist it off. That bit comes away, and then boom, that's your float, that's the bowl. That makes it a lot easier for us to clean. Hopefully from this you can see that it's a bit of a bugger to try and do all this in the car. It is possible to do, but you'll never do quite as thorough as a job unless you remove it from the vehicle. So now it's time to start rebuilding our fuel filter assembly. So this is a Ryco filter. They do claim that these are as good or better than your genuine ones. They're also quite readily available as well, and a little bit cheaper than genuine. Doesn't really matter which way you go. You can go genuine filters if you want. They're probably my number one choice, but funds and availability said otherwise. Now it is a little bit of a different color. I think the genuine ones are more of a white color when they start. These are a bit more of a yellow. Same amount of filter paper, same amount of spacing in there, so I'm happy to run it. But before we put our new filter in place, we obviously need to put the water trap sensor back in as well. Once you've got the water pickup sensor in there nice and firm, you can obviously just turn it by hand. It's only held in by a little rubber O-ring, so you don't have to go nuts with trying to make it too tight. You can then slide it back into the actual housing. So that just goes back in there. And you can tell it's right because obviously that's going to be on the side of the car. Once you drop those in and line those bolt holes up, your wiring should be towards the front of the vehicle, so heading that side near your fuse box, and the drain should be facing towards the rear or that rearwards direction. So that's how you know it's orientated properly. There is a number of indexes where that water sensor locates, so you can rotate it as necessary. So with that all done, we can then fit our filter back in place. This is the new O-ring, so this sits up the top there. We're going to install this wet with a little bit of diesel. and that sits up the top, and then the new filter will go in place. You'll know this is seated correctly because it will actually make a little sort of click or a thud when it sits in nicely. There we go. We can then install the top of our fuel filter assembly. It doesn't really get too dirty, this one here. You can give it a wipe and sort of get any excess diesel and stuff off it. It will seal on that big rubber O-ring we've just put there. So again, we're going to try and locate that so that once this sits up in place, we're going to have our outlet facing there, our wiring facing towards the fuse box, and you want to line it all up so that you have your fuel outlets facing where they need to go. So once that's all lined up there, I'm going to throw one bolt through. I believe from factory these come with like Torx head bolts, but obviously the previous owners decided to put in normal metric bolts instead. Much more common to carry a 10mm socket around than it will be for Torx bits, but everyone's own choice on that matter there. Again, you are only tightening a little rubber O-rings, so there's no need to go overboard with your torque. Cool, and that's now ready to go back in the car. Let's put it back in place and then move on to doing the oil filter. So with that all back in place, we're pretty much done. When you go to start the car, this filter is empty, and you'll find that there's some air in these fuel lines as well. So when you go to start the car, you'll notice that it will try turning over as it's trying to suck fuel all the way through there. Obviously at that point, the fuel pump is running dry. It will do damage over time. You can do it that way if you want to. I used to, until I was advised, hey, you should probably fill the fuel filter up before you try and start the car, which some people do by pouring diesel straight into the bowl before they put it all back together. I prefer, because I've got 270 litres of diesel on board, to use the diesel that's here. So you can actually use your primer here, and you're going to pump that. What that's doing is it's pulling fuel in from the fuel tank into this bowl. It'll then pressurise the bowl and then send it onto the fuel pump. So you keep pumping on this until it is nice and rock hard. There we go. So that's now very firm. So what that means is when I go to start the car, there is already fuel in the fuel filter, there is fuel in the fuel lines all the way to the fuel pump, so the car should just start up and away we go. Alright, let's finish off with the oil change and then we'll get to the diffs. So now that we have our oil filter and assembly, we can remove our filter cartridge, which is that bad boy there. That comes out the way, that's to get disposed of. Now you've got this metal sort of inner... Now you've got this metal cylinder that goes on the inside of the oil filter. This is extremely necessary. I can't stress this enough, how much you need to make sure this is retained. Get the rest of this oil out of the way. What that does is under pressure, obviously oil getting sucked through that filter, this metal device is there to stop the filter from imploding, from sucking in on itself and collapsing. And if that happens, then that stops oil flow to the engine and eventually you have goodbye engine. So it is extremely important that you make sure that this metal cylinder is always there. I'm going to just see if I can get this thing out as well while I'm here. Oh, there we go. So that's what you should be able to get out. You should be able to remove this little end cap here, and then allows you to drain the oil from the oil filter assembly and you don't cover yourself in oil like I had to do. So inside this there is a little, where'd it go? There is a little rubber O-ring that will come out. You are replacing that, so that sits in like that, and that comes out. So you're going to get a new one of those. So clean where that little O-ring is going to sit. Make it nice and clean. Get our new filter. This is what helps a lot of it. So this thing that comes with the Ryco filters is a drain. So once you take that out of the bottom of the filter housing, you should be able to basically plug this into the bottom. Oop. There we go. So that should plug into the bottom like so, and as that's sitting there, that will allow the oil to drain out. It gives you a nice little nozzle for it too. So definitely worth keeping one of those handy in your workshop. In the pack, Get rid of all this yucky stuff. There's our brand new oil filter cartridge and our new seals as well. So like I said, that bottom one there, that's the old one. There's a new one in there. There's also a larger one. This one's white. The factory one is black. And it is this large seal that seats around the bottom of the thread, which holds the filter housing into place. So I'll just clean all the oil, old oil out of that. So I'm happy that's as clean as it can be. We're now going to start reassembling it all. So we're going to start with our small O-ring. Going to get a little dab of oil on this one. Where's my engine oil gone? So a little bit of engine oil just to help with keeping this seal nice and wet. Now that's on there, we can tighten this one up. Now the next one we're going to do is the big oil seal. So that big white one, again a little bit of engine oil. You just want it to sort of lightly coat the new O-ring. Keeps it, just helps with the sealing. So you go on there and you roll that down into position where it's sitting now. And after that, it's just the oil filter to go on. Doesn't really have a top or a bottom. It's all pretty much the same. Slots on, make sure it sort of seats in nicely. And we're ready to go and screw this back into the car. I'll put this one back in the car and I'll show you the correct, I'm going to go screw this one into the car. You know what it looks like coming out, so you know what it's going to look like going back in. And I'll put the correct torque setting and everything on the screen now as well, so you can know how tight you should be doing these things up. So now that we've done our fuel filter, we've done our oil filter, we know it's on there nice and tight. We've done our sump plug as well, and we know that one's nice and tight. We're ready to fill the car back up with oil. Toyota specified 9.2 litres for this vehicle. I've got a 10 litre container and we're going to fill this up. So what I usually do here is I fill it up because obviously we're using over 9 litres of oil. I can pretty much use 75 to 80% of this container, throw it straight in there, and from there use the dipstick and check my levels and go from there. So I'm going to start filling it up now, and I'll show you the finished result with the dipstick. So that's after letting it rest for a little bit. It's about 3/4 of the way up the dipstick, so I'll probably add another 100 or 200 mil and go from there. So our next job we're going to tackle is the front diff. We're going to be replacing the oil in that. Keen eye of you can see the fill plug, which is just down here, and the drain plug is underneath there. We do need to take the bash plate off to allow this to drain properly. You could probably just let it drain on top of the bash plate, but I have no idea where it's going to go, and knowing my luck, it's going to go in 28 different locations, and I'm just going to get oil everywhere. So I'm going to drop the bash plate off, and then we'll have a look at opening the fill and the drain plugs on the front diff. Alright, so I've just dropped the bash plate out of the way. Previous owner managed to use 16 different types of hex-headed bolts, but whatever. Now we've got access to it, especially for the drain side of it. Now before you go and obviously drain out all your oil, you better check that you can fill the oil back up again. Ask me how I know that mistake. So you should probably, the first thing you should do is pop the fill plug, which is this top one up here. Now that is accessible with a 10mm Allen key, which I have one here, but unfortunately the way that this Allen key sits is it's either too far to move it, or it's too far back to get the Allen key on, so it's in a bit of a pickle of a spot. So you could really sort of muck around with your Allen key and trying to get that to work. You may have Allen key drivers that you could use as well, but I've got the next best thing. So this is a tool which is supplied by Kaon, K-A-O-N, and this is actually the first tool I ever bought from Kaon. It is a front diff plug removal tool. So for whatever reason in the Prados, and I know the 200s also have it as well, the plugs, because they're a 10mm hex, they can get rounded quite easy if the plugs are seized in there. And obviously once you round the plug, you've got very few options to move forward. So what Kaon have done is they've made this little doohickey here. It's basically like a 10.5mm hex head on that side, so it's a tiny bit bigger than standard. And then on the back of it is a 24mm hex head, single hex head. So what that means is that if, for whatever reason, these are rounded, you can take that side, put it into either of the fill or the drain plug, whichever one's rounded, and basically hammer it in a few times, and that will sort of make this sort of locate and grab on really firmly. You've then got a 24mm hex head you can use with a spanner or with a socket to get it loose. So in this instance it actually works in our favour because we can use this in the fill plug. So I can actually put this in the fill plug with that hex head bit in there. It's again just the right size so that it does sit in there, but if it was rounded you'd hammer it home and it would still sit really well. And that gives me a 24mm hex head that I can use to open this. So the easiest way I got it is I've got a socket and a bracket bar, and I can then go to town on it and get a bunch more angles on it too. Oh, good, that cracked it. I was really hoping that that wouldn't kill me. If this was seized, we'd obviously be doing a lot more work, but that's okay. And just before I forget, if you do remove your factory fill plug, so this one here, see if I can get that to come up, but already that's got damage on it. I don't know how many times this front diff's been changed, but there's definitely damage on there from people, so it wouldn't take too many more services to round it. But for whatever reason, that rounds it. You use your new tool and you get it off. K-On actually supply a replacement drain plug with a 24mm hex head straight on the top there. So that's really, really cool. And obviously these all come straight from K-On. So if you're looking to get preemptive with your parts to buy for your 200 series, your Prado, whatever it may be, definitely grab one of these kits from K-On because they make your life so much easier when the proverbial hits the fan. So now the fill plug is out of the way, we can do the drain as well. I'm just putting my oil pan under there before I forget it. So I'm going to use the same tool as well just because it is so easy. Alright, let's crack it open. There we go. Yeah. The tool has done its job. Alright, let's see what this diff oil looks like. Ugh. So the front diff only holds about 1.9 litres of oil, which isn't a huge amount, but you can already see here like it's already starting to drip. You may be able to see, but obviously for filming purposes I like to provide as much space for myself as possible, and for the camera, that the car is higher on this passenger side than it is on the driver's side, which isn't helping this to come out. But the reason I do this is I actually have an axle stand on the opposite side, so that side is lifted up. I've taken the wheel off of here. I've got a jack stand under the trolley jack under the chassis. So what I can do now is I can actually lower this side, and you should notice that the oil coming out of that diff will speed up as we get the last little bit. Let's try it out. There we go. So now that this side's much lower than the other, and that oil sort of started to speed up, coming back out. I'll leave it for 5 minutes and then we'll start topping it back up. So I'm just reinstalling the new K-On fill plug with that 24mm hex head. Just put a little bit of oil on the threads. That way next time it's a little bit easier to undo. And the K-On one comes with a brand new sump washer as well, or plug washer, whatever you want to call it, which is great. And if you're going to reuse the factory one, make sure you're also replacing the washers on them too. I'll put the factory torque setting for these on the screen now. So now we're ready to fill the diff back up with oil. Again, like I said, it takes about 1.9 litres of oil in the front diff. I'm using the Penrite Pro Gear 75W85, which is what is recommended for the 200 series. You do need to make sure that whatever oil you choose is a GL5 rated oil, which is quite high. So this is a fully synthetic oil, but that's what Toyota recommends, so that's what I'm using. The easiest way to do this is with an electronic transfer pump, like an oil transfer pump. I don't have one. I've got one of these trusty old bottles here. Yes, they take a while, but it does the job. So I'm going to start filling this up. These are a 1 litre bottle, so I'm going to use one of these plus 0.9 of the next one. So let's go. So as mentioned, there is about 1.9 litres of oil that goes in the front diff. But the genius foolproof way about it is also, you know that you've hit the max line when diff oil starts to leak back out of the fill hole. Because once you fill it up to that fill hole, you should be at 1.9 litres. And that should be any time now. Beautiful. Now we can refit our fill plug. Just be sure to replace the crushable aluminium washer with a brand newie, and we're ready to go back on. I'm actually going to reuse the plug removal tool to help torque this up, because I don't trust myself with a Allen key not to round it for the second time around. So our next job is to change over the fluid in the transfer case, which is this bad boy up here. The exhaust is a little bit in the way for the camera to see, but it is there. There is a factory transfer case cover already on here, which needs to be removed, as well as this vibration dampener as well. So two 14mm sockets, two 14mm bolts, sorry, and you got about, I think there's about 8 12mm bolts you're going to take out to remove this bracket. So we're going to get ahead to that. So now you should be able to see a bit more of the oily mess that's going on. The output seal here, I think, is leaking, which we'll replace down the track, which is where all this oil is coming from. But we may as well change the oil while we're here too. That'll also give us an indication of how much oil is leaking. You know, this could be 5 mils of oil spread out all over it, or I could have lost half a litre of oil, I don't know. These here are going to be a 24 mil, so we're going to reuse our socket like we did on the front diff. We're going to release our fill plug first, so we can be 100% certain that we can get oil back into the transfer case. There we go. And then we're going to drain all that oil out of the drain plug here. Oh. All right, let's see if we can not cover myself in oil this time. Oh, yeah, that's very black. Got a real funky smell to it too. We'll let that drain for a few minutes and then we'll come back. So now that I'm happy the transfer case is all emptied, I've just refitted the drain plug. I'll put the factory torque setting up on the screen now for you to see. We're now going to start filling this back up with oil. It only takes 1.5 litres of oil, and again, once you get to a little bit of oil dribbling out of the fill mark, you know it's full. So we're going to go pump some oil into that now. So for the transfer case, Toyota do recommend using a 75W90 oil, so slightly different to the differentials. So that's what I'm putting in here now. Again, they specify a GL5 rating for the oil, which is what I've got. It is the Pro Gear, the Penrite Pro Gear. They do a 75/90 oil in the GL5. So we're going to start pumping that in now. All right, so we just started to dribble a bit of oil out of the fill hole. So we can now refit the filler plug, and we will tighten this fill plug up to spec. And there we go, we've changed the oils over in the transfer case. All we've got to do now is refit that guard back on and then do the bash plate. Yeah, now we'll move on to the rear diff, because you've seen how that's all done. So let's go and do the rear diff now. So we've saved the easiest job for last. If you are wanting to get into any sort of mechanical work and just see what it's like, definitely try changing over your rear diff oil, because it is super simple, super easy, and pretty hard to stuff up, to be honest. But we've saved this till last, so that it's always nice to do the easiest job last. We're going to change the rear diff oil. There's nearly, I think it's about 4.5 litres of oil in the back diff, but we're going to change it out. I haven't got extended diff breathers on this car, so I'm expecting there to be a little bit of water in this thing, but we'll see. So we'll crack the fill plug first. Oh, there we go. No point draining the oil if you don't know if you can get it back in again. And now we'll drain the, take the fill plug, the drain plug out. And get this in. If you do any mud driving, you get the mud that dries in this little protection ring. Means you can't get your socket in. Easy enough to scrape out with a screwdriver. Cool. There we go. Actually doesn't look too bad. Let it all drain out, see how it looks at the end. With the drain plug, on the end of it, there is actually a magnet. You can see there it just spins freely. That can build up a little bit of metallic sludge on there. So it's just really fine particles of metal that just come off due to wear and tear in the drivetrain. And they obviously get stuck to that magnet so they're not floating around. When you pull that out, you can inspect it. There will be a slight sludge there. Wipe it off, that's fine. If you find that there's like large chunks of metal, it may be indicative of further damage inside the diff. So if that's the case, you may want to get the diff pulled out and inspected. But mine just had some metal sludge, that's fine. We're just going to remember to obviously clean off the diff plug, put on a new crushable aluminium washer, which again are about $1 from Toyota. Then reinstall our drain plug. And once again, I'll put the proper torque setting up on the screen for you now. Now we get the fun job of refilling the rear diff. Again, like the front diff, Toyota specified to use a 75W85 GL5 rated oil. I'm using exactly the same oil that I put in the front diff, which is from Penrite, the Pro Gear. And like I said, this one takes about 4 litres of oil. So I'm going to be here for a while. This is where those oil transfer pumps definitely come into their own, because it makes this job so much quicker. But if you don't have one, and then an external 12-volt source, you can always just buy one of these cheap little pumps from Super Cheap, Repco, anywhere like that. I think they're about 15 or 20 bucks. And slow and steady wins the race. All right. So diff oil's just started to come back out that hot fill hole, so we know that it's full. I can reinstall our fill plug as well with a new washer. And tighten to the factory torque. Tighten to the factory torque setting. Beautiful. And with that, we're done. So the last thing is to keep a service record of the vehicle. That includes everything you've replaced, what kilometers you've replaced it at, the date, any part numbers you may have used, viscosity of oils, that sort of stuff. It really helps for down the track when you want to know exactly what you've done to the car and when. Also helps with resale so that your potential buyer can know everything you've done to the car. They can see it's well taken care of and that it's well documented. Thank you guys so much for watching. That was a full service of the 200 series. It's now ready to go for another 10, 15,000 Ks before I have to look at it again. And yeah, I know I can rely on this car. If you have any further questions or comments of what I've done in this video, please leave them down in the comment section below. I'm interested to learn from you if you've got any pointers or tips, or if you've got any questions, I can always help out with those as well. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Off-Road Crusader. Cheers.